Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Earlier on in the year I did a video on DNFing books, whether we should or shouldn't DNF books. And this video today is a little bit of a follow-on from that, where I asked the question, are some of the books that I have DNF'd over the years, do they deserve another chance? Stay tuned. Okay, what we're going to do first of all is I'm going to choose 5 books that I've DNF'd that it is highly unlikely that I will ever pick them up again. And I'll explain why. And then conversely, I will look at 5 books that I may just pick up again at some stage before I die. Because they were intriguing and there are a number of reasons why I would like to read them again. Okay, I've listed 5 criteria for my decision making and for my thought processes. Number 1 is the obvious one. Do I own the book? Because obviously if I don't own it and I've DNF'd it already, it's highly unlikely with all the books out there that I'm going to re-buy the book. Number 2, why did I give up on the book? What is the reason? Perhaps there was something happening in my life at the time, I was a student, whatever, there must have been a reason why I gave up on the book. Number 3, also another important one, is does the book have any redeeming qualities for me as a reader and for what I've read on the book? Now, this is interesting because I was having a discussion with another booktuber that all books mean something to someone. So the books that I actually lay out here, some people love these books. Just because I didn't love them doesn't mean they're a bad book necessarily. So we need to bear that in mind when I go through the list a little bit later. Number 4. When did I read this book? At what age did I read the book? Because that can have a huge impact on your enjoyment. Perhaps you read a book that's way too young for you, or you read a book that is way too complex for a young mind to unravel. So this is something I have to think about when I made this list. And number 5, I've gained a little bit of a new interest in different genres. So I never would have even thought about reading science fiction. But in the last few months I have added 1 or 2 more sci-fi horror books to my lists and my TBRs. So that will have a big influence on my choice as well. Okay, and before we begin, there is a little bit of overlap between this video and the video that I mentioned, that I made in March. And I will actually link that video towards the end of this video, so you can check that out as well. But I am taking this one a little bit further by giving proper examples and picking up books and thinking, is it worth it to try read these again? Okay, the first book that I'm highly unlikely to read ever again is The Resurrectionist by Ross James White. Now, I don't want to completely knock this book because I know there are fans of extreme horror out there that did enjoy this particular book. It just did not work for me. Basically, I found the story tedious, and I found the scenes incredibly gratuitous, sort of almost, torture porny. And yeah, I've got other books that I would much rather read than pick this one up again. That is The Resurrectionist. Oh, and by the way, for those of you that don't know the basic story, The Resurrectionist is about a man who has a special power, and he can raise the recently dead. Now, unfortunately, he is a sick, psychotic, twisted, evil bastard. And he uses his power or gifts to basically resurrect his neighbor night after night after night after violently raping and killing her. So yeah, I did not enjoy this book, and I did drop it about halfway, so it's just not worth it. Okay, next up we have the author of a beloved children's series, Goosebumps, with his first attempt at writing an adult horror novel. And that is R.L. Stine, Red Rain. And now, I don't want to bash this author because I've never read any Goosebumps. I was not one of those that were brought up on Goosebumps and Fear Street, or those young adult novels. But I really just did not enjoy this book, and yeah, some people may enjoy it, so once again, some people might find value in it. I just think it's very poorly written, and even though the story sounds interesting enough, it is about an island and a hurricane that causes devastation on the island, and there's two creepy kids that become involved as well. Yeah, I'm not going to pick this book. Even though I own it, I highly doubt that I will give this another try. That is Red Rain. Okay, next up we have The Historian by Elizabeth Kostover, I believe. Now, this book was incredibly dense. A retelling of Dracula, the story of Dracula. Very descriptive, very wordy. And yeah, I might appreciate it now because I read it when I was much younger, or tried to read it when I was much younger. But I no longer own a copy, so for me that's out of the question. It's not going to happen. That is The Historian. Okay, next up we have The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielowski. Now, I tried very hard to read this novel when I was younger. It is incredibly complex, incredibly difficult to unravel. A story within a story within a story, and I no longer have a copy. I would actually like to try it again at some stage, but there's no way I'm going to buy it and DNF it again. Yeah, it's about a house where the dimensions inside the house seem to be too big for the outside of the house, but it is so much more than that. And there's footnotes, and there's all sorts of stuff like the writing going backwards, and it just has so many layers to it. And I've heard so many people rave about it, and I'm sure if you push your way through, it's a great book. However, you need a lot of concentration, a lot of effort, and I think it's a huge matter of time and energy to finish this book. So it's not going to happen. That's House of Leaves. When I was younger, I read a fantasy story for YA about a boy and his dragon called Aragon, and I finished the first 3 books in the series, this being the 3rd, Brisinga. But I have to say that I've outgrown this series, I've outgrown this kind of book, YA fantasy, although I loved it very much at the time. It's not something that I'm going to pick up these days. If I'm going to pick up a fantasy, I'll pick up something that I'm going to mention just now. That is Brisinga and Aragon series. Okay, now on to the books that I may well give another chance to. And first of all, let's talk about Stephen King, Under the Dome. Now, this is a massive book, and it's one of the only Stephen King novels that I've ever read the first 100 pages or so, and put down. It was just too much for me. It's about this small town that gets trapped up from the outside world, and nothing can get in, no one can get out, and the absolute craziness that follows after that. And yeah, I'm definitely going to read this book, but it'll probably be one of the last Stephen King books I read, because I'm definitely going to read every book he's ever written, and I'll probably save this till last, more as a completionist thing than anything else. That is Under the Dome. Okay, number 2 on the list of books that I will read at some stage, possibly, is Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. Now, the only reason that I didn't finish this book was because I was studying at the time, doing my university degree, majoring in English and psychology, and I just did not have the time to read this series and to study. Now that I'm older and I have a little bit more time on my hands, I might well pick up this book again. I absolutely loved the miniseries, and this is just fabulous example, I think, of grim dark fantasy or dark fantasy. I'm not sure where you would put it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this book again. It might not be something people would want to see on my channel. That's why I've actually placed a community poll. Go check that out. But even if I don't talk about it on the channel, I'm definitely planning on reading it on the side. That is the Game of Thrones. Next up we have Quicksilver by Neil Stevenson. And man, this is a beautiful cover, check that out. Now, this is also a very long, very complex, very philosophical kind of novel that I tried to read when I was way too young. and I'm kind of intrigued to give it a go again. Let me just read a little bit of the back. A massive tour de force, dense, witty, erudite, packed with fascinating characters and gripping. Quicksilver is an indication that Stevenson's Baroque cycle is shaping up to be more impressive literary endeavour than most so-called serious fiction. Okay, and then just go down a bit here. It says it's a novel of history, adventure, science, invention, sex, absurdity, piracy, madness, death and alchemy. It sweeps across continents and decades, upending kings, armies, religious beliefs and all expectations. Yeah, so this sounds very, very interesting. I think I'm at an age and maturity where I might appreciate it a bit more. But once again, this is a horror channel, so this might not be something that I discuss too much on this channel. Unless you tell me so in the comments below. That is Quicksilver. Okay, and the second to last entry is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Now, I absolutely love Dan Simmons. I thought I owned this book, so this might not actually happen, but I love Dan Simmons. I love his horror, I love the terror, I love Carrion Comfort, and I loved Summer of Night, which I talked about in my last video, and which I'm going to be doing a proper comparison review with shortly, possibly Thursday. But I've always had a problem with science fiction. There's something about the fact that it's almost too busy, the ideas are just too out there, too otherworldly, and I've always liked my horror and fantasy and stuff like that grounded more in reality. However, I have been thinking and kind of enjoying the science fiction genre a little bit more. In terms of some of the books that I've been reading, yeah, it has been kind of enjoyable. So if I was to pick up a big science fiction novel, it would be by an author like Dan Simmons, who I already know and who I already love, and but I have to give that another go. And that is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Okay, finally we have a book that in my previous video in March I said that I would probably never pick up again, but I have since reconsidered my stance towards this novel, and that is The Passage by Justin Cronin. Now, as you all know, or most of you know, I'm crazy about post-apocalyptic fiction, and this is a post-apocalyptic novel about vampires and a hell of a lot more. Now, I've still got the bookmark in this book, so yeah, if I'm going to read it again, I'm going to start from the beginning. It's got a lot of 5-star ratings on Goodreads, a lot of people rave about it, so all I can say is perhaps I missed something, and maybe there's something more to this book than meets the eye, and I'm going to give it another go at some stage. That is The Passage by Justin Cronin. I love the cover as well. Okay everyone, so there were my 10 books, 5 of which in all probability I'll never pick up again, and 5 books which I might consider reading again. I don't think if you DNF a book that normally you would come back to it, but there are exceptions, as I've stated, and this is something that a lot of people think about. Maybe you're just shelving it for later, as opposed to actually never picking it up again. And that's what I was trying to bring across in this video. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment in the dark spaces down below. And be sure to take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.